Day 16. The clock was ticking, a relentless whisper in the quiet mansion, counting down the precious moments Isabella had left before her choice became an irrevocable command. Each sunrise was a stark reminder, painting the sky with colors that mocked the darkness gathering inside her. Her body hummed with a restless energy, a nascent power she barely understood, yet felt deeply intertwined with her very essence. Henry had been a constant presence, his silhouette a familiar comfort in the periphery of her vision. Their training sessions had become less about combat and more about a strange, unspoken dance, his hands on her waist as he guided her parry, the brush of his arm against hers during a feint, the intense gaze that held hers a second too long. Each touch sent a jolt through her, a dangerous thrill that had nothing to do with self-defense. He was a paradox, a hunter by instinct, a protector by choice, and a man who was slowly, inexorably, carving a place for himself in her heart. They spoke less of the impending transformation, and more of their lives before this chaos. She learned of his austere childhood in the Blackwood Order, the rigid discipline, the unwavering belief in a world divided into light and shadow. He, in turn, listened to her tales of a normal life, a career, friendships, the simple joys that now seemed impossibly distant. In these shared moments, the lines between hunter and prey blurred, replaced by a fragile bridge of understanding and mutual respect. That evening, as twilight bled across the sky, painting the clouds in bruised purples and fiery oranges, they sat on the grand, neglected patio overlooking the wild, overgrown gardens. The air was heavy with the scent of jasmine and impending rain. "Elias," Isabella began, her voice soft, breaking the comfortable silence. "He was more than just your mentor, wasn't he?" Henry's gaze drifted to the horizon, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "He was the closest thing I had to a father. After my own died, he taught me everything: how to track, how to fight, how to survive in a world that denies its own monsters." A bitter edge crept into his tone. "He taught me to hate them, to eradicate them without question." Isabella reached out, her fingers hovering inches from his arm, a silent question in her eyes. "And now?" He turned to her then, his sapphire eyes a swirling storm. "Now, I question everything." He paused, a long, drawn-out moment where the world seemed to hold its breath. Elias, he wasn't just a hunter. He was a man burdened by secrets and promises. He didn't elaborate, but the weight of his words hung in the air. A new mystery unveiled. Isabella knew instinctively it had something to do with her father, Alessandro. And with her, Day 17 brought a change in the air, a subtle shift that mirrored the deepening connection between them. Isabella's senses sharpened. Every sound, every scent, every whisper of the wind amplified to an almost overwhelming degree. She could hear the faint scuttling of a beetle beneath the floorboards, smell the distant rain long before it arrived, and taste the metallic tang of blood on her own tongue, a constant, unsettling reminder of what she was becoming. Henry noticed the changes too. He observed her with an almost scientific fascination, yet with an underlying tenderness. During their sparring, her movements were becoming impossibly swift, her reflexes inhumanly fast. He found himself struggling to keep up, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips even as he pushed her harder. "Your strength. It's escalating rapidly," he noted, catching her wrist with surprising difficulty. "And your eyes. Sometimes they gleam with something more than human." Isabella pulled her hand back, a flicker of fear in her gaze. "It's terrifying, Henry. This hunger, it's a constant ache. And the nightmares, they're so vivid, so real. I see teeth, blood, shadows that whisper my name." He stepped closer, his hand coming to rest on her cheek, his thumb gently stroking her skin. "I know. It's the change, the darkness calling, but you are stronger than it, Isabella. You always have been." His voice was a low, comforting rumble. "We'll face it. Together." The unspoken, "I will not let you become a monster," hung heavy in the air. But this time, it felt less like a threat and more like a promise. Day 18. The training had evolved into something almost primal. A dance of two predators, one awakening, one honed. Isabella's movements were fluid, powerful, her body a vessel for immense, barely contained strength. She no longer simply mimicked Henry's forms, she anticipated them, sometimes even surpassed them. Their conversations grew deeper, more raw. Henry spoke of the toll his life had taken, the loss of innocence, the constant vigilance. It's a lonely existence. Isabella, living in the shadows, always hunting, always hiding, never truly belonging anywhere. Isabella, in turn, shared her deepest fears, the fear of losing herself, of becoming the very thing she'd been taught to fear her whole life. What if I can't control it, Henry? What if the hunger consumes me? What if I hurt someone I love? Her voice cracked on the last word, her gaze meeting his. A profound vulnerability laid bare. He pulled her into a fierce embrace, holding her tightly, his chin resting on her head. Then I'll be there, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I'll be there to remind you who you are, to fight beside you, to hold you, even if you have fangs. His words were a balm, a lifeline in the swirling chaos of her transformation. In that moment, the world outside their embrace ceased to exist. Day 19. The air in the mansion crackled with an unspoken tension, an electric charge that was almost palpable. It wasn't just the impending change or the looming threat of the council. It was the undeniable, suffocating weight of their desire. Every glance held a secret. Every touch ignited a spark. Isabella found herself watching Henry, memorizing the planes of his face, the way his muscles flexed, the intense focus in his eyes. Her new senses made his scent intoxicating, the warmth of his skin an irresistible draw. They had been sparring again, a fierce, exhilarating dance that ended with Isabella pinning him against a marble pillar, her breath ragged, her body humming with power. Their faces were inches apart, her chest heaving against his. His hands were braced against the pillar above her head, but he made no move to push her away. His eyes, dark and turbulent, searched hers. Isabella, he breathed, his voice a low growl that vibrated through her. Her gaze dropped to his lips, full and tempting. The hunger, the raw, visceral craving, was no longer just for blood. It was for him. She felt an almost painful ache in her chest, a desperate longing that transcended fear and logic. Henry, she whispered back, her fingers clenching into the fabric of his shirt. The world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. The silent mansion, the beating of their hearts, the ragged edge of their control. He leaned in, slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Her eyes fluttered closed as his lips, soft yet firm, finally met hers. It was tentative at first, a hesitant exploration. Then it deepened. A tempest unleashed. His mouth moved over hers with a hunger that matched her own. A desperate plea for connection in a world determined to tear them apart. His hand slid from the pillar, cradling her face, then tangling in her hair, pulling her closer until there was no space left between them. Isabella's own hands crept around his neck, pulling him down, abandoning herself to the intensity of the moment. The kiss was fire, desperate and demanding, a promise of everything they both yearned for. Day 20. The first rays of dawn painted the bedroom in soft hues of rose and gold, but Isabella didn't notice. She was lost in the warmth of Henry's embrace, her head nestled on his shoulder, his arm a comforting weight around her. The night had been a blur of sensation, an exquisite symphony of touch and emotion that had transcended all their fears, all their reservations. Their intimacy wasn't just physical, it was a profound merging of souls, a silent vow exchanged in the hushed darkness. He stirred, his fingers gently tracing the curve of her spine. "Good morning, vampire-to-be," he murmured, his voice husky with sleep and something more profound. Isabella giggled, a sound of pure joy that surprised even herself. "Good morning, hunter-turned-lover." She looked up at him, her eyes shining. I never imagined." "Me neither," he finished, his gaze tender, reverent. "But here we are, and I wouldn't trade it for anything." He kissed her forehead, a soft, possessive gesture. "After last night, Isabella, how can you even think of forgetting this? Of forgetting me? His words echoed her own burgeoning certainty. Last night had sealed it. The choice wasn't just about her transformation anymore. It was about their future. Life without Henry, without this fierce, undeniable connection, was unimaginable. The thought of the ritual, of forgetting him, now felt like a death sentence worse than any vampire curse. He shifted, rising on an elbow, his gaze suddenly serious. There's something else, Isabella. Something I should have told you days ago, but the time never felt right. It's about Elias. And your father, Isabella, sensing the gravity of his words. What is it? Elias, Henry began, his voice low and riddled with an old pain. He didn't just hunt vampires. He had a deep, personal history with them. Your father, Alessandro. They weren't just enemies. They were once friends, Isabella gasped, sitting bolt upright. Friends? My father? With a Blackwood hunter? Yes, it's complicated. Alessandro saved Elias's life once, in a distant land, long before Elias joined the Order. There was an understanding, a debt. And when Alessandro knew he was being hunted by the Council, knew his pure bloodline was a target, he sought out Elias. He made him promise. Henry's eyes held hers, unwavering. Alessandro made Elias promise to watch over you, to protect you, should the Council ever come for you. Elias couldn't openly defy the Order, but he swore to Alessandro he would ensure your safety, whatever the cost. He spent years covertly gathering intelligence, trying to prepare for this day. Henry's voice dropped. He believed your mother was human, that you wouldn't inherit the full change. But he knew the risks. He planned for the Council to find you, but hoped to intervene. Then he died. Isabella finished, a fresh wave of grief washing over her, mixed with a strange sense of clarity. So he knew about me all along. And he protected me. He did. And his promise, it became mine when he passed. Protecting you, Isabella, is the last vow Elias ever made. Henry reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers, and I intend to keep it. Day 21. The revelation about Elias and Alessandro solidified Isabella's trust in Henry, binding them even closer. The intricate web of alliances and ancient debts made the world feel both larger and infinitely more dangerous. She understood now why Henry, a hunter, was here, risking everything for her. It wasn't just passion. It was a sacred duty, intertwined with a burgeoning love. But the world was not just them. The Council's deadline loomed, and Lucian's shadows stretched ever longer. Margot, who had been a fleeting presence, began to reemerge, her movements more secretive, her eyes holding an unsettling glint Isabella hadn't noticed before. The Council is growing impatient, Margot informed them one afternoon, her voice tight. They've received reports of your activities, of your blossoming powers, Isabella. Some factions see you as a threat, an abomination. Others, like the ancient Nyx, still advocate for your potential, for the pure bloodline. She paused, her gaze flickering to Henry. But patience is running thin. Lucian is already making his move to sway the vote against you. Isabella felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. What kind of move? What can he do? Margot wrung her hands. He claims to have evidence that you are unstable, that your bloodline is a corruption, not a gift. He's gathering allies, promising them control over New Orleans if they support him in eliminating you. Henry stepped forward, his eyes narrowed. What kind of evidence, Margot? You've been quiet for too long. What aren't you telling us? Margot averted her gaze, her lips pressed into a thin line. A seed of doubt, cold and sharp, began to sprout in Isabella's mind. Day 22. The tension in the mansion was a living thing, coiling tighter with each passing hour. Isabella spent her time poring over Alessandro's journals, seeking answers, trying to decipher the cryptic hints about the pure bloodline. Henry, meanwhile, was meticulously mapping out the city, tracking Lucien's known movements, trying to predict his next attack. Their bond grew stronger, forged in the crucible of impending war. They moved with an unspoken synchronicity, finishing each other's sentences, anticipating each other's needs. The fear of what was to come was ever present, but so was the fierce, unwavering love that had bloomed between them. Late that night, as a storm raged outside, mirroring the turmoil within, Henry found Isabella gazing out the window at the lightning-streaked sky. He approached her, wrapping his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "The storm is coming, Isabella." In more ways than one, she leaned into his embrace, finding solace in his strength. "I know, but I'm not afraid. Not as long as you're with me, and I'll always be with you," he vowed, his voice raw with emotion. "No matter what." Day 23. The morning began with an unsettling calm. Margot, ever the picture of quiet efficiency, informed Isabella that she had managed to intercept a message, an invitation for Isabella to meet with an unaligned elder who wished to offer assistance. The meeting was to take place in a deserted warehouse on the industrial outskirts of the city, away from the prying eyes of the council. "It's risky," Margot admitted, her eyes darting nervously, "but it could be our only chance to gain an ally against Lucian. This elder is known for his neutrality, but he holds significant sway." Isabella looked at Henry, who was already scrutinizing the coordinates Margot provided. His brow was furrowed in concern. "It smells like a trap," he said, his voice flat. "Too convenient." "Perhaps," Margot conceded, "but if we don't take risks, we'll lose everything. The council meeting is set for the 30th. We have less than a week." After much debate, and against Henry's better judgment, Isabella agreed. The allure of a potential ally, a chance to tip the scales in her favor, was too strong to resist. She needed more than just Henry. She needed an army. They arrived at the decrepit warehouse just as dusk began to fall, painting the industrial landscape in shades of bruised purple and gray. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the distant rumble of a freight train. Inside, the warehouse was vast and empty, the air thick with dust and the scent of decay. There was no sign of an elder, no sign of anyone. "Margot, this isn't right," Henry whispered, his hand instinctively going to the hilt of his concealed blade. Before Isabella could reply, a chilling, familiar voice echoed from the shadows. "Oh, it's very right, Hunter. Perfectly right, in fact." Lucien emerged from behind a stack of crates, his smile a cruel slash in the dim light. Behind him, 3 other vampires, their eyes gleaming red, materialized. But it was Margot who stepped out of the deeper shadows, moving to stand beside Lucien, her face devoid of any emotion. "Margot," Isabella breathed, her heart plummeting into her stomach. "No, it can't be." Margot's eyes, usually warm, were now cold and hard. "I'm sorry, Isabella, but my loyalties were decided long before you woke up with fangs. Lucian promised me a place of power, a true purpose, in his new order, something the stagnant council would never allow." Her voice was devoid of remorse. "Your pure bloodline is a threat, a destabilizing force. It must be contained, or better yet, controlled. Lucien understands that." "You betrayed me," Isabella whispered, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. The pain of the betrayal was a physical blow, sharper than any blade. "It's nothing personal, Isabella," Lucian purred, stepping forward. "Just business. And now, you will come with us. The council wishes to expedite your transformation, under our supervision." He gestured to the vampires behind him. "Take them, carefully. We want the pure bloodline intact." Henry didn't hesitate. "Run, Isabella!" he roared, drawing his blade and lunging at Lucian's guards, a whirlwind of motion. Isabella, reeling from the betrayal, felt a surge of raw, untamed power awaken within her. This wasn't just fear, it was fury. Margot had gambled with her life, with their lives, and she would make them pay. Day 24. The warehouse had become a battleground, dust and debris flying as Henry, a blur of deadly precision, fought Lucian's vampires. Isabella, fueled by a searing rage, unleashed her burgeoning powers. She moved with impossible speed, her strength now rivaling Henry's, surprising even herself. She parried a vampire's attack with a casual ease, her fist connecting with another's jaw with bone-shattering force. but there were too many. Lucian, observant and calculating, watched from the sidelines, occasionally throwing a powerful blast of energy that sent Henry stumbling. Margot, for her part, mostly stayed back, her face a mask of cold satisfaction. "You're a fool, Henry," Lucian taunted, his eyes fixed on Isabella. "She's already lost to you. Look at her. The beast is awakening." Isabella, hearing him, felt a chill. Was he right? Was this just brute force, or something darker? She pushed the thought away. Henry needed her. They managed to escape, but not without scars. Henry had taken a deep cut to his arm, and Isabella bore numerous bruises and a graze on her temple. More importantly, the escape route confirmed Henry's suspicions. Lucian was moving his operations to the old Lafayette Cemetery, using its labyrinthine tombs and crypts as a temporary stronghold. Back at the mansion, battered and weary, the air was thick with the weight of Margot's treachery. Isabella felt a profound sense of isolation, the betrayal cutting deeper than any physical wound. "She played us from the start," Henry gritted out, tending to his wound. "She was feeding Lucian information, probably manipulating the Council's fears against you." Isabella felt a cold, hard resolve settle in her heart. "Then we take the fight to them. We don't wait for the 30th. We end this now." Day 25. With the Council's deadline days away, and Lucian actively trying to capture her, waiting was no longer an option. Isabella and Henry spent the day meticulously planning their assault on Lafayette Cemetery. Henry knew the old burial grounds, its hidden passages, its crumbling mausoleums. He had hunted there before. "It's a dangerous place, Isabella," he warned, tracing a finger over a faded map. "The energy there is thick, old magic, sorrow, lingering spirits, and vampires thrive on that kind of residual power." Isabella nodded, her face grim. "Good. Let them thrive. They'll need all the strength they can get." Her own powers were evolving at an alarming rate. She could sense the presence of others before they spoke, hear the distant beat of their hearts. Her hunger was a constant, gnawing presence, but now, fueled by rage and determination, she felt she could channel it, control it. She practiced, unleashing raw energy, bending the shadows to her will, a terrifying dance with her nascent abilities. Henry watched her, a mixture of awe and concern in his eyes. She was becoming something magnificent, terrifying. He knew he had to protect not just her, but the person she was, the soul beneath the fangs. "We go tonight," Isabella declared, her voice firm, resolute. "Under the cover of darkness, we end Lucian. We bring down his twisted ambition." Day 26. The air was heavy, humid, and still as death when they approached Lafayette Cemetery. The wrought iron gates, ornate and rusted, stood like sentinels to a forgotten kingdom. Twisted oaks, draped in Spanish moss, cast long, eerie shadows across the crumbling tombs. The silence was profound, almost deafening, broken only by the distant croaking of frogs and the pounding of Isabella's heart. Henry moved like a shadow, his every step deliberate, noiseless. Isabella, her new senses fully attuned, detected the faint scent of old blood, of damp earth, and of something else, something ancient and powerful, humming beneath the ground. They found their way to the catacombs, a labyrinth of underground passages lined with decaying crypts. The air grew colder, thicker with the scent of age and death. As they navigated the oppressive darkness, a sudden surge of heat pulsed through Isabella. Her eyes narrowed, focusing on a barely perceptible movement ahead. "Wait," she whispered, grabbing Henry's arm. "I feel them. Many, lying in wait." They pressed themselves against a crumbling wall, listening. Faint whispers, guttural and predatory, echoed from deeper within. Lucian was here, and he was expecting them. "This is it," Henry murmured, his hand tightening around hers. No turning back. Isabella met his gaze, her eyes burning with an unyielding resolve. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Day 27. The confrontation was swift and brutal. As they rounded a corner in the catacombs, they were met by a dozen vampires, their eyes blazing red in the gloom, their fangs bared. Lucien stood at the center, a smug smile on his face. Margot a shadowy figure by his side. "Welcome, Isabella," Lucien sneered, his voice echoing eerily. "It's time you embraced your true nature. We've brought you a feast." Before he could finish, Henry launched himself forward, a whirlwind of blades and fists distracting the closest vampires. Isabella, however, focused on Lucien, a cold fury lending her impossible speed. She broke through the line of vampires, her enhanced strength sending 2 flying against a tomb wall. "You want my bloodline, Lucien," she snarled, her own fangs now extended, her eyes glowing a fierce crimson. "Then come and get it." The battle descended into chaos. Isabella fought with a primal ferocity, a dance of death and power. She discovered new facets of her pure bloodline. When her blood, spilled from a minor cut, splattered on one of Lucien's vampires, the creature shrieked, not in pain, but in an agonizing transformation. Its skin blistered, its form contorted, and in mere seconds, it rose again, its eyes now shining with a mixture of confusion and loyalty. It was no longer under Lucien's thrall. It was bound to Isabella. A chilling realization struck her. Her blood didn't just transform. It reforged. It didn't kill. It converted. This was the true power of the pure bloodline, a power to create, to sway, to bind. She wasn't just a weapon. She was a new beginning. She used this power, strategically, desperately. A touch, a splash of blood, and Lucien's ranks dwindled, his own forces turning against him. Margot, seeing the tide turn, hesitated, a flicker of fear in her eyes. "You fool!" Lucien shrieked, realizing what was happening. "She's not just a Dhampir, she's a siren, a creator." Day 28. The battle raged, a symphony of snarls, steel, and shattered stone. Isabella, fueled by her new understanding of her power, began to dominate. She moved like a storm, creating converts from Lucien's ranks, turning his own strength against him. The creatures she touched by the pure bloodline, gained a new form of sentience, a fierce loyalty to her, a hunger that was now controlled. But Lucien was a master vampire, ancient and cunning. He unleashed a devastating surge of dark magic, aiming directly for Isabella. Henry, seeing the incoming blast, didn't hesitate. He threw himself in front of her, taking the full force of the attack. "Henry!" Isabella screamed, her voice a raw, primal sound of agony and terror. He crumpled, his body hitting the cold stone floor with a sickening thud. The dark energy had ripped through him, leaving him charred and broken, barely clinging to life. His eyes, though clouded with pain, found hers, and he offered a weak, loving smile before his consciousness faded. Isabella felt a primordial rage ignite within her, a volcanic eruption of power that dwarfed anything she had experienced before. It wasn't just the Dhampir strength, it was the pure bloodline unleashed, a force of creation and destruction. The cemetery pulsed with her fury, the ground trembled. The remaining vampires, even Lucien, recoiled in fear. With a guttural cry, she turned on Lucien. Her movements were a blur, too fast for even him to follow. She slammed him against a tomb, holding him suspended by his throat, her fangs mere inches from his jugular. "You will pay for this," she snarled, her voice a low, terrifying rumble that echoed through the catacombs. "You will suffer." Lucien, for the first time, looked truly terrified. But she didn't kill him. She realized that was what he wanted, for her to become the monster he claimed she was. Instead, she chose a different path. With a powerful surge of her unique bloodline, she forced a transformation upon him, binding him to her will, erasing his malevolent free will, turning him into a thrall, a puppet to be used against his own. A chilling, powerful demonstration of her ultimate control. Margot, who had witnessed the entire terrifying display, slowly sank to her knees, her face ashen, her betrayal a bitter poison in her own mouth. Isabella ignored her. She rushed to Henry, falling to her knees beside him, her hands trembling as she cradled his broken body. His skin was cold, his breathing shallow. He was dying. No. she whispered, tears streaming down her face, mingling with the blood and grime. "No, you can't leave me. Not now. Not after everything." She looked at her own hands, still vibrating with power, then at the blood oozing from her wounds. A desperate, terrifying thought formed in her mind. Her blood had just transformed Lucien. Could it save Henry? Could it bring him back from the brink? And if it did, what would he become? Day 29. The remnants of the battle lay scattered around them, but Isabella saw none of it. Her world had narrowed to Henry, to his pale, still form. She had dragged him back to the mansion, bypassing the chaos, her single-minded focus on saving him. He lay on her bed, barely breathing, his life force flickering like a dying candle. The 30th day was less than 24 hours away, but the council, the choice, the world outside, it all faded into insignificance. Only Henry mattered. She knew what she had to do. The choice had been made for her the moment Lucien's blast had torn through Henry's body. Her human life, her future without him, was a hollow, desolate prospect. To lose him now, after finding such profound love, was unthinkable. With trembling hands, she bit into her own wrist, drawing forth a stream of her potent, pure blood. It glowed faintly in the dim light. Almost alive, she brought her wrist to Henry's lips, forcing a few drops into his mouth. His body convulsed, a violent tremor passing through him. His eyes flew open, wide and unfocused, then slammed shut. For a terrifying minute, nothing happened. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, his wounds began to mend. The charred skin regenerated, the blood reabsorbed. His breathing deepened, regularized. Isabella watched, her heart pounding in her chest. A mixture of hope and profound fear. Was she saving him? Or was she condemning him? Then, his eyes opened again. They were no longer the deep sapphire she knew, but a startling, vibrant crimson, identical to her own. He looked at her, confusion clouding his new, predatory gaze. "Isabella." His voice was a rasp, new and raw. Tears of relief streamed down her face. "Henry," she choked out, pulling him into a gentle embrace. "You're alive. You're one of us." He slowly raised a hand, touching his face, then hers. His new senses were overwhelming him. The scent of her blood, the thrum of her power, the new, insatiable hunger that pulsed within his veins. But beneath it all, his eyes found hers, and the love that shone there was undeniable, untainted. "You saved me," he whispered, a tremor in his voice. "You changed me." "We changed each other," she corrected, her voice firm, resolute, "and I wouldn't have it any other way. This was my choice, Henry. To be with you, forever." Day 30. The morning sun, usually a herald of doom for nascent vampires, seemed to smile upon them. Isabella, her transformation complete, and Henry, newly turned and still adjusting, stood on the balcony of the mansion, their hands clasped tightly. Their eyes, now both a luminous crimson, reflected the fiery hues of the sunrise. The council, having been informed of the events in the cemetery by Margot, who, shattered by Lucien's fate and Isabella's power, had returned seeking sanctuary and offering her full cooperation, had made its decision. Isabella, the her of the night, the pure bloodline, was not just accepted. She was revered. Her unique power to create new vampires without killing the original host was a game-changer, a profound shift in the balance of power within the ancient community. Lucien, now a docile thrall, served as a chilling testament to her capabilities. The ancient Nyx, her eyes filled with an ancient wisdom, had approached Isabella. "You are the prophecy, child, the bridge between worlds. Your choice has not only saved yourself, but has brought a new dawn to our kind." Isabella, now fully confident in her new skin, in her fangs and her immense power, had felt a deep sense of purpose. She had chosen not just to become a vampire, but to become a vampire for love, for a future with the man who had stolen her heart. She turned to Henry, his new vitality thrumming beside her. His senses were still adjusting, the world a cacophony of new smells and sounds, but his gaze on her was steady, unwavering. "How do you feel?" she asked, her voice filled with a tenderness that defied her new predatory nature. He smiled, a slow, sensual curve of his lips that sent a shiver down her spine. "Powerful, alive, and impossibly hungry. For you?" He leaned in, his new fangs glinting in the morning light, kissing her with a hunger that was now their shared language. Their lives would be different now. They would navigate the complexities of the vampire world, rebuild the council, and face new threats with their combined strength. But they would do it together. Isabella, the pure bloodline, the her of the night, and Henry, her devoted hunter, now her devoted vampire. As the sun climbed higher, casting a warm glow over New Orleans, Isabella Crane, once a human woman facing an impossible choice, now stood as a powerful, loving vampire queen, ready to embrace eternity with the man who had shown her that even in the darkest shadows, love could not only survive, but thrive. Their story had just begun.